The city bled with the rhythm of rain. It wasn't a gentle, cleansing fall, but a relentless, drumming assault that smeared the neon glow of the metropolis into a fractured, shimmering mess. The air was heavy, smelling of wet asphalt and ozone, a scent Detective Miles Corbin had come to associate with disaster. He stood at the edge of a yellow-taped crime scene, his broad shoulders hunched against the downpour. His trench coat, a relic of countless other long nights, was soaked through, the fabric clinging to his frame. His hands were buried deep in the pockets, clenched into fists, a desperate attempt to contain the cold that had worked its way into his bones. His face, etched with lines of sleepless nights and hard-won lessons, was a study in grim resignation. His eyes, a cold, hard blue, scanned the humming power substation before him, their focused intensity a sharp contrast to the apathetic slump of his posture. The victim was a young man, a city engineer barely out of his 20s. He was laid out neatly on a bed of slick black gravel, his posture unnaturally serene. A cryptic symbol, sharp and precise, was carved into his chest, a line of dark blood bleeding into the gravel like ink on a blotting paper. The scene was devoid of the usual chaos, no signs of struggle, no overturned equipment, just this one final tableau. Captain Anya Sharma emerged from the shadow of a transformer, her calm exterior barely containing a volatile temper that Miles knew all too well. She carried herself with the weary authority of a woman who had seen too much. Rain beaded on her brow as she approached, her expression a mask of strained composure. "Corbin, we've got nothing," she said, her voice low and strained, almost a rasp. "No forced entry, no struggle. Forensics says the victim was here for less than an hour before we found him. We have no witnesses, no prints, nothing." Miles didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on a maintenance panel on the wall, a spider web of tangled wires and blinking lights. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, ignoring the protest of the officer blocking his path. His eyes were wide, taking in every detail of the scene. The body was positioned with surgical precision, the left hand touching a low-voltage conduit, the right foot touching a ground wire. "Look at the kill," he muttered, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that barely cut through the sound of the rain. He didn't just murder him, he integrated him. The body's positioned to complete a circuit, a human resistor. He didn't just kill him, he made him part of the grid. Sharma's eyes widened, her cool composure cracking under the weight of his words. A line formed between her brows, and her lips parted in a silent gasp. The rain seemed to stop for a moment, the world narrowing down to just the two of them. "That's a hell of a leap, Miles," she said, her voice shaking slightly with disbelief. She took a step closer, her face a mix of fear and professional skepticism. "You're building a whole motive out of a hunch." "Is it?" Corbin finally turned, his eyes meeting hers. They were a cold, hard blue, and in their depths she saw not a hunch, but a terrifying certainty. The apathetic slump was gone, replaced by a tense, alert posture. His lips were a tight, hard line, his jaw clenched, the muscles working under his skin. The victim worked for city power. The symbol on his chest isn't just a scribble. It's a modified electrical ground symbol. He's not a killer, Anya. He's an architect. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a statement, a message. He gestured with his chin towards the vast, interwoven network of power lines that hummed overhead. The killer had seen a symphony of connections and chosen one of its silent conductors for his gruesome masterpiece. He sees the city not as a collection of streets, but as a circuit board, Miles said, the finality in his voice leaving no room for argument. And we just found his first node. The episode ends with Miles staring up at the city's vast, interwoven network of power lines and electrical towers, the sound of rain a distant, forgotten melody. He knows, with a chilling certainty, that this is not the end of the hunt. This is just the beginning of the game. The city's heartbeat had become a frantic drum. The media, a ravenous beast, had dubbed the killer the architect. The name was fitting, a nod to the cold, calculated precision of the crime. Police brass were scrambling, a chaotic whirl of press conferences and panicked directives. But for Miles Corbin, the noise was just background static. His singular obsession was with the killer's mind. He was in a mental chess match, and he was already 5 moves in. His office, a small, windowless box, was a monument to his obsession. Blueprints for the city's infrastructure were tacked to every available surface, a sprawling, paper-thin network of pipes, cables, and tunnels. His new partner, Detective Liam Chen, was a stark contrast to the chaos. Chen was young, maybe 30, with a perpetually worried expression and a neatly pressed shirt. He moved with a nervous energy, his gaze flicking from the blueprints to Corbin, who sat at his desk, head in his hands, a forgotten coffee cup growing cold at his elbow. "He's got no discernible pattern of location, but I don't think that's the point," Corbin said, his voice a low rumble. He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, narrowing on a specific section of the map. He pointed with a thin, almost skeletal finger. He started with the power grid. Now what, Chen? Water? Gas? Fiber optics? He's not killing people in random places. He's moving through the city's veins, tracing its essential systems. His face was a mask of intense concentration, a flicker of manic energy starting to replace the weary exhaustion from the night before. Chen nodded, his jaw tight. He was taking in Corbin's unorthodox methods, his detailed theories that skirted the line between brilliance and madness. "So he's methodical. It's a progression." "It's a declaration," Corbin corrected, his gaze fixed on the map. "He's telling us he understands how this city works better than we do." A sudden, sharp ring cut through the tense quiet of the office. It was a burner phone, a direct line from forensics. Corbin snatched it up, his face hardening as he listened. The color drained from Chen's face as he watched his partner. "Got it," Corbin said, his voice clipped and devoid of emotion. He hung up, his eyes meeting Chen's. Another one. The subway tunnels. Transit authority worker. Found on the 3rd rail. Chen's eyes widened with a mix of horror and dawning comprehension. The killer had moved from the power grid to the city's circulatory system, its transit. The pattern was there, now undeniable. They arrived at the subway station, the air thick with the smell of stale air, metal, and something foul and coppery. The crime scene was deep within a maintenance tunnel, far from the public eye. The victim was a burly transit worker, his body a silent, grotesque connection between the 3rd rail and a metal catwalk. The kill was precise, efficient, and horrifyingly symbolic. As the crime scene photographers snapped away, Corbin knelt down. He ignored the victim, instead scanning the damp, graffiti-strewn walls. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He was searching for something. A clue, a message, a confirmation. And then he saw it. A faint, spray-painted number 2 on a concrete pillar, half hidden by shadow and dust. It was small, unassuming, but in that moment, it was everything. A jolt of electricity, cold and sharp, shot through him. The exhaustion on his face was replaced by a spark of manic energy, a thrilling, terrifying understanding. A slight, almost imperceptible smile, not of joy, but of grim, unsettling satisfaction, played on his lips. "He's counting," Corbin said, his tone strangely devoid of emotion, almost a whisper. "He's telling us what's next." Chen followed his gaze, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. The young detective's voice was barely audible. "Counting what, Miles?" Corbin stood up, his eyes now alive with a terrifying, singular focus. The smile on his lips widened just a fraction, a chilling gesture in the dim light of the tunnel. "His masterpieces," Corbin replied, the word hanging in the air like a final damning verdict. The pressure from the city was immense, a physical weight that seemed to crush the very air out of the precinct. Captain Anya Sharma's office door remained ajar, but her voice, sharp and laced with an edge of pure stress, cut through the bullpen. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight as she fielded calls from the mayor's office. "I understand, sir, but we're tracking a pattern, not a random killer. It takes time." The words were a thin shield against the rising tide of public panic and political demands. Corbin, however, didn't seem to hear her. He was hunched over a conference table, a single high-intensity desk lamp casting a harsh, clinical glow on his face. He ignored the rhythmic slamming of Sharma's hand on her desk, the desperate cadence of her voice. His focus was singular, absolute. He had a stack of files, a digital ghost of the city's every system, and he was hunting for a connection. "We have the numbers, Corbin. Use them. What's his next target?" Sharma finally emerged from her office, her gaze a fiery demand. Her eyes, filled with a raw, desperate energy, pleaded for an answer he didn't have. Corbin didn't flinch. He remained focused on the files, his voice a low, steady counterpoint to her frayed emotions. "We have the numbers, Captain, but we're not talking about locations. We're talking about systems. We need to find the victim's connection." Chen, sitting across from him, cleared his throat nervously. He scrolled through a tablet, reading from a list of victim data. "They were both loners, no family," he said, rattling off the facts with a professional detachment he didn't feel. His brow furrowed with a mix of concentration and growing unease. Both worked night shifts. They had access to restricted areas. No known enemies, no significant digital footprint. Corbin's jaw clenched, a muscle in his cheek ticking. His eyes, fixed on the screen, narrowed into slits. He was not looking at the victims as people. He was looking at them as parts. It's not about who they were, it's about what they enabled. The victims aren't the point, they're the means. He's not killing them, he's plugging them in. He's building something. The burner phone in Corbin's pocket buzzed, a silent, unsettling vibration. He pulled it out, his expression unreadable as he glanced at the text message. It was a single, cryptic phrase. "Number 3 is ready." Corbin looked at Chen, his face a mask of grim determination. It's time to find the next connection. They arrived at a sleek, sterile high-rise, a monument to corporate power. The air was filled with the low, steady hum of servers. The room was a cold, alien landscape of blinking lights and humming machines. The victim, a network administrator, was found in a small, isolated room, his body arranged to mimic a server stack. His spine was broken, his limbs unnaturally bent, and his head rested on a power strip. The killer's signature, the number 3, was faintly visible on the power strip's plastic casing. A small, arrogant signature on a piece of art. Corbin's eyes swept over the scene, his gaze unwavering. He moved with a quiet, unsettling calm that contrasted with Chen's palpable anxiety. Chen's face was pale, his eyes wide, with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. It's like he's arranging them," Chen whispered, his voice trembling. "They're not just bodies, they're part of a pattern." "No," Corbin said, his voice a chilling whisper. He knelt down, his eyes fixed on the power strip. He's not building a monument to himself, he's building a network. He's connecting the city. He looked at the victim, his gaze full of a strange, chilling mix of pity and professional curiosity. This man wasn't just a victim, he was a silent, unmoving part of the killer's macabre system. Corbin's eyes then flickered to a stray wire on the floor, a single, black, untraceable fiber optic cable that led from the victim's body to a nearby server rack. It was a single, thin thread, but Corbin knew in that moment that it was the key. He grabbed it, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The cable was a physical link, a terrifying and undeniable clue to the killer's mind. "This is it," Corbin said, his voice thick with a mixture of grim satisfaction and cold dread. This is the link. Corbin and Chen were holed up in their office, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and unaddressed anticipation. The rogue fiber optic cable lay on the conference table like a venomous snake, its slick black casing a stark contrast to the sprawling mess of blueprints. Corbin's fingers traced its path on the map, a line drawn from the high-rise server room to a long-defunct communications hub on the industrial edge of the city. He'd barely slept, his mind a frantic, ticking clock. "This is it, Chen," Corbin said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "The source, the core of his network." Chen, who was meticulously packing a small forensics kit, looked at him with a mix of professional resolve and barely contained fear. "The last 2 crime scenes were bait, right? To get us to this point?" Corbin nodded, a grim smile on his lips. "He wants us here. He's been laying a breadcrumb trail. This is his territory now, and he's not just going to let us walk in." The defunct communications hub was a sprawling, concrete mausoleum of obsolete technology. The air was cold and stale, smelling of dust and decay. Their flashlights cut through the absolute darkness, painting the cavernous space with shifting pools of light. Every footstep echoed with a chilling resonance. "It's too quiet," Chen whispered, his voice barely audible above the low, steady hum of the building's ancient ventilation system. His grip on his firearm was tight, his knuckles white. Corbin didn't reply. His senses were on high alert. Every shadow a potential threat, every creak of metal a harbinger of a trap. He moved with a practiced fluidity, his gun held low, his eyes darting back and forth. The killer was here. He could feel it. This was the spider's web, and they were walking right into the center of it. They found a series of monitors, their screens dark and lifeless, arranged in a semicircle. As they got closer, the monitors suddenly flickered to life, bathing the room in a cold, electric glow. The static gave way to a single, haunting image. A face appeared, obscured by a digital mask, a mosaic of disconnected lines and pixels. But his eyes were visible, a pair of sharp, intelligent orbs staring directly at them, filled with a cold, almost detached amusement. A voice, synthesized and cold, filled the room, amplified through hidden speakers. "Welcome, detective. You've been paying attention." The voice was a perfect, chilling mockery of a human cadence, devoid of any genuine emotion. Corbin's face went hard, a mixture of rage and grim satisfaction. His jaw clenched, and his eyes, a cold, hard blue, stared directly into the killer's digital gaze. "You're not an architect. You're a coward. You don't build things, you break them. You're a predator, hiding in the shadows of a broken city." "On the contrary," the voice replied, a chilling chuckle echoing from the speakers, a ghost of a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "A predator is defined by its ability to adapt to its environment, and this city, with its tangled veins and its fragile systems, is my environment. I am merely a part of the ecosystem, doing what comes naturally." Corbin's fingers tightened on his gun. He took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Where are you?" The killer's face disappeared from the screen. A new video played, a live feed, showing a person being led into the shadows of a labyrinthine sewer tunnel. The video was shaky, handheld, and gave a nauseating sense of immediacy. Corbin's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a static image. It was happening now. Corbin looked at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The killer wasn't just taunting him, he was showing him. This wasn't a game of intellect, it was a race against time. The chase began in the mouth of a sewer grate, a gaping, rusted maw that swallowed them whole. The stench hit them first, a thick, overwhelming cocktail of stagnant water, damp earth, and something foul and metallic. Their movements were a desperate, frantic echo of the chase on the screen. The victim was in the city's vast, dark sewer system, a maze of concrete and filth that served as the city's hidden circulatory system. "He's using the sewer system as a conduit," Chen shouted, his voice echoing in the tunnel, sharp with panic. His flashlight beam danced wildly, illuminating murky water and walls slick with green algae. Corbin's face was slick with sweat, his breathing ragged and loud in the enclosed space. He wasn't just hunting the killer, he was fighting the city itself, a living, breathing machine that had suddenly turned against them. He knows every turn, every entry point. This is his home turf. His words were clipped, his focus a singular point of light in the darkness. They waded through ankle-deep water, the cold seeping into their boots, their footing unsure on the uneven ground. The maze of tunnels was disorienting, and the faint, garbled voice of the killer, amplified by hidden speakers, taunted them from unseen corners. "Keep up, detective. The clock is ticking." Corbin's eyes, a cold, hard blue, darted back and forth, trying to match the shaky video feed on his burner phone to the physical reality of the tunnels. The sounds were overwhelming, the drip of water, the scuttling of unseen rats, the distant roar of a sewer pipe. Every shadow held a potential trap. Just as they rounded a sharp bend, a distant scream, high-pitched and full of terror, ripped through the humid air. Corbin's eyes flashed with a primal, gut-wrenching panic. The exhaustion and professional detachment were gone, replaced by a raw fear for the victim. "That way!" he yelled, his voice a desperate command. They ran, their ragged breathing and splashing footsteps the only sounds in the suffocating silence that followed. They found the victim huddled in a small, damp alcove, shaking with fear but unharmed. She was a young woman, a city planner, her face tear-streaked and pale. But her hands were tied with the same black, untraceable fiber-optic cable, and on a nearby wall, the number 4 was spray-painted in a chilling red. This wasn't a rescue. It was a trap. The killer was toying with them. Suddenly, the voice filled the small alcove, loud and close, as if the killer was standing right behind them. "You're too slow, detective. You're always one step behind." Corbin's head snapped up. He looked at Chen, his face a mask of confused frustration, and then his eyes scanned the ceiling. He saw it, a small grate half hidden by a tangle of pipes. A flicker of movement. The killer was just above them, his eyes, those sharp, intelligent orbs, staring directly at them from the darkness. Corbin raised his gun, his hands shaking slightly from a mix of pure adrenaline and frustration. But the killer was gone. He disappeared into the darkness, a ghost in the machine. A cold, chilling chuckle echoed from the speakers, a final mocking sound. The victim was safe, but the killer had won this round. He had led them on a chase, played them like pawns in his game, and then escaped with chilling ease. Corbin lowered his gun, his shoulders slumping in defeat. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated frustration, the lines on his forehead deep and pronounced. He looked at the trembling victim, and then at the spray-painted number 4, a silent, arrogant signature on a battle he had just lost. The hunt was no longer a cerebral puzzle. It was a race against a man who knew the city's every hidden nerve, a master of its dark underbelly, and they were just scratching the surface. The precinct felt less like a hub of law and order and more like a pressure cooker on the verge of explosion. The media, a ravenous beast, had dubbed the killer the architect, and his evasion of the police was a constant headline, a public shaming that the police chief was no longer willing to tolerate. His voice, strained with a mix of political pressure and genuine fury, boomed from his office. "You're not catching him, Corbin. You're playing his game. I'm pulling you off this case if you don't give me something, anything, within the next 24 hours. Corbin, however, remained unmoved. He was at his wits' end, The exhaustion from the sewer chase, a dull ache in his bones, but his focus was singular, absolute. He was hunched over a colossal map of the city, a digital ghost of every pipe and cable, a sprawling, complex nervous system of data and power. The map was a monument to his obsession, a testament to a man who had not slept, had not eaten, had not done anything but hunt the mind of a ghost. He's not just using the systems, he's communicating through them, Corbin muttered, his voice a low, gravelly hum, barely audible above the low, constant chatter of the bullpen. His eyes, bloodshot and dark with lack of sleep, were fixed on the map, seeing not just lines and symbols, but a terrifying new language. The killings are just a side note. It's about the connection. Chen, who was standing beside him, his expression a mix of awe and concern, looked at him, his brow furrowed. But what's the connection, Miles? We've gone from power to transit to fiber optics. There's no pattern. He's just picking a new system and a new victim. Corbin's fingers, stained with ink from the endless hours of studying the blueprints, traced a line on the map. It was a line that ran parallel to every other major system, but it was unlabeled, a phantom network of pipes and tubes that seemed to lead nowhere. A subtle discrepancy in the blueprints, a network of abandoned pneumatic mail tubes from the 1920s that no one knew still existed. This was the ghost network he'd been looking for, a hidden circulatory system of communication and data, a secret language that only the killer could understand. Corbin's face, etched with lines of sleepless nights and hard-won lessons, was suddenly a mask of terrifying understanding. The exhaustion and frustration were gone, replaced by a spark of manic energy, a terrifying, exhilarating realization. He's not building a network. He's building a voice, Corbin said, the words hitting him with the force of a punch to the gut. He's going to use the city to speak to us. He looked at Chen, his eyes wide, alive with a terrifying, singular focus. The smile on his lips was not one of joy, but of grim, unsettling satisfaction, the look of a man who had just solved a puzzle he wished he never had. He's not communicating with us through the murders, Chen. He's making a statement. This isn't about violence, it's about a broadcast. He's going to broadcast a message to the city, his final message, and he's going to use this ghost network to do it. Corbin snatched the burner phone from his pocket, his hands shaking slightly from the sudden rush of adrenaline. He called Sharma, his voice shaky with a mix of fear and excitement. He's going to broadcast. He's going to make a statement. Find me every abandoned broadcast antenna in the city. The episode ends with Corbin staring at the intricate, interwoven network of pipes and wires on the blueprint, his eyes seeing not just a map, but a terrifying, intricate vocal cord, ready to sing a song of destruction. He had found the ghost, but now he had to find the voice. The derelict radio station on the city's highest point stood as a skeletal monument to a bygone era. Wind howled through its rusted lattice, a mournful, metallic sound that was both unsettling and fitting for a place so desolate. The air was cold, a biting mix of damp concrete, ozone, and the faint, coppery scent of decay. Corbin and Chen, their figures silhouetted against the bruised pre-dawn sky, approached the main entrance, their footsteps crunching on a carpet of broken glass and rusted bolts. Corbin's face, a map of grim determination, was lit by the single beam of his flashlight, its thin white light dancing across the grime-streaked concrete. His lips were a tight, hard line, his jaw clenched, the muscles working under his skin. "This is it," Chen whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind's low moan. His hand, shaking slightly, rested on the butt of his gun. "The antennas. He's going to use this place." Corbin didn't reply. His senses were on high alert, every creak and groan of the building a potential warning. He pushed open the heavy steel door, its hinges groaning in protest, and they slipped inside. The absolute darkness swallowed them whole, a suffocating, inky blackness that felt alive. And then, as if on cue, the building's ancient lights flickered to life, bathing the cavernous space in a cold, sickly yellow glow. The killer's voice, no longer synthesized or garbled, but raw, unfiltered, and full of a cold fury, filled the airwaves. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a chilling, disembodied presence that made the hairs on Corbin's arms stand on end. "They built this city on lies," the voice boomed, the words echoing off the concrete walls, "on the illusion of connection. But they are all alone. I am here to remind them." Corbin's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated concentration. He tilted his head, his eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep, fixed on a point in the distance, as if he could physically see the sound waves. He was listening not just to the words, but to the timbre of the voice, the cadence, the subtle inflection that spoke of a deep-seated grievance. He knew that voice. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. A former city engineer, a man fired for raising concerns about the city's aging infrastructure, a man with a mind as meticulous as the architects. "He's not just a killer. He's a prophet," Corbin said, his voice full of a new, chilling resolve. "He doesn't just want to destroy the city, he wants to prove he was right all along. This is his final sermon." They followed the voice, a hypnotic beacon in the labyrinthine building. They found the killer's makeshift control room, a small, soundproofed chamber that housed a chaotic mess of wires, monitors, and jury-rigged broadcast equipment. It was a digital altar, a monument to a twisted ideology. On the main screen, a live feed flickered to life, showing a small, dimly lit room with a single chair. In it, her hands bound, her mouth gagged, was Captain Anya Sharma. Corbin's eyes went wide with a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated rage. His lips, a thin, hard line, trembled slightly with a mix of anger and helplessness. He looked at Chen, his face pale with a mix of fear and morbid fascination. "He got her," Corbin said, the words a raw, guttural growl. His hands, clenched into fists, trembled with fury. "He got her." "He's not killing her," Corbin said, his voice thick with a mix of dread and dawning comprehension. "He's making her the final conduit. He's going to use her to speak for him. She's the last piece of the puzzle." Corbin's eyes, a cold, hard blue, stared directly into the digital gaze of the killer's live feed. He could see a small, almost imperceptible smile play on the killer's lips, a cruel, mocking gesture of triumph. The killer had won this round, a final, horrifying victory. He had not only outsmarted Corbin, he had taken the one person he cared about most, and in doing so, he had forced Corbin to play his game one last time. Corbin's face, etched with lines of sleepless nights and hard-won lessons, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated resolve. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury. The game was no longer about a ghost in the machine. It was about a man, a woman, and a city on the brink of collapse. And Corbin was the only one who could stop it. The killer's voice, a raw, unfiltered torrent of fury, ripped through the city's airwaves. It wasn't just coming from the radio station. It was a cacophony echoing from every abandoned PA system, every forgotten intercom, a million tiny, grating speakers that had suddenly come to life. The city itself had become the killer's mouthpiece. "They are all alone," the voice boomed, a constant, grating presence that felt like a physical weight on Corbin's shoulders. "On the illusion of connection. But they are all alone. I am here to remind them." Corbin didn't wait. The chilling image of Anya Sharma on the screen was burned into his mind. He and Chen burst out of the radio station, their footsteps clattering on the fire escape stairs. The city below was a scene of pandemonium. Cars screeched to a halt as confused drivers looked for the source of the voice. Pedestrians stopped dead in their tracks, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. The lights of the city seemed to dim slightly, flickering in time with the killer's words. It was a grand public shaming, a performance designed to prove his point to the world. Corbin, however, was in a state of high alert, his senses screaming. He ignored the chaos, his focus singular and absolute. He was a human lie detector, listening not to the words, but to the intent behind them. He heard the killer ranting about the city's broken promises, its decayed systems, and its disconnected people. "I warned them," the voice hissed, filled with a cold, righteous anger. "I told them this city would collapse under its own weight. Now I'll show them." The words hit Corbin with the force of a punch to the gut. Show them? It wasn't just a metaphor. It wasn't a philosophical statement. The killer's plan wasn't to kill her, but to use her, the city's very protector, to trigger a citywide blackout. The electrical grid, the water systems, the communications, all would fail at once. The killer was going to make his words a terrifying reality. "He wants to plunge the city into darkness," Corbin said, his voice raw, hoarse with a new, chilling dread. His eyes darted frantically, not at the ground, but at the rooftops. He was searching for a ghost in the machine, a man who had become one with the city's architecture. He wants to prove his point. He wants the city to see its own fragility. Chen, running beside him, looked pale. "Miles, we can't be sure of that. We have to get to Sharma." "No," Corbin countered, his voice a low, gravelly hum. The professional detachment was gone, replaced by a cold, primal rage. His hands were clenched into fists, the knuckles white. He won't kill her. He's going to make her the final conduit. He's going to use her to turn the lights out. She's his silent conductor. We have to find him before he pulls the switch. His eyes, a cold, hard blue, scanned the skyline. He was seeing the city not as a collection of buildings, but as a vast, complex electrical system, and he was hunting for the short circuit. He saw a flash of movement on a nearby rooftop, a fleeting shadow that moved with inhuman speed. It was the killer. Corbin's rage, a slow-burning fire that had been simmering since he first saw Anya's face on the monitor, finally boiled over. He abandoned all caution. He didn't wait for Chen. He broke into a full sprint, his feet a rhythmic, pounding drum on the cold concrete. He leapt over a chain-link fence, his trench coat flapping behind him, and scaled a series of fire escapes and ledges, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The climb was a desperate, unthinking act. His fingers, scraped raw from the jagged metal, found purchase, and he pulled himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. He could hear the wind whipping around him, the distant wail of sirens, the muffled screams of the panicked crowd below. But all he could focus on was the figure on the rooftop above him. He was a man possessed, a singular point of focus in a world of chaos. His breathing was ragged, his lungs burning with every desperate intake of air, but he pushed on. He had to reach him. He had to stop the final, devastating broadcast. The chase led Corbin, raw and battered, to the skeletal summit of a skyscraper. Wind, a living, screaming entity, tore at his trench coat and whipped a cold rain across his face. Below, the city was a shivering blanket of light, and above him, the giant broadcast antenna reached into the churning, bruised sky. The killer was already there, his gaunt figure a dark silhouette against the glow of the city. He was not panicked, not frantic. His movements were quick and precise as he worked on the antenna's control panel, a man at peace in his twisted, high-altitude sanctuary. Corbin pulled himself over the final ledge, his knuckles raw and bleeding, his muscles screaming in protest. His breathing was a ragged, painful gasp in his chest. He stood, his feet unsteady on the rain-slicked metal catwalk, his body a trembling monument to pure, unadulterated rage. He raised his gun, the cold metal a familiar weight in his hands. The killer turned, and in that moment, the world narrowed down to just their two faces. The killer's face was finally revealed, no digital mask, no filter. He was gaunt, his skin stretched taut over sharp bones, and his eyes, wild and feverish, burned with a cold, fanatical light. And in that same instant, the pieces of Corbin's past clicked into place with a sickening finality. It was him, the ghost from years ago, the one he had arrested for a minor act of sabotage on a city data network. He had been a low-level engineer, a man dismissed as a harmless crackpot. But Corbin had seen something in his eyes, a spark of manic obsession that had haunted him for years. He'd made a recommendation to watch him, but the city had dismissed it. Now, that ghost had returned to haunt them all. "You knew," the killer hissed, his voice a low, guttural sound that was almost lost in the wind's howl. His face was a contorted mask of hatred, every muscle pulled taut with a righteous fury. "You knew I'd be back. You saw what they couldn't. This city is a broken machine. It needs to be reset, and I'm the one who will do it." Corbin's hands, shaking slightly from a mixture of adrenaline and the profound emotional weight of the moment, tightened on his gun. He could feel the rage, a hot, liquid fire coursing through his veins, burning away the exhaustion. "You're not a reset, you're a virus, and you're done infecting this city." The killer lunged, not with a weapon, but with a horrifying primal ferocity. A struggle ensued, a desperate fight on the windy, rain-slicked rooftop. It was a brutal, ugly scramble, not a clean exchange of blows. The metal shrieked and groaned as they grappled, their bodies a single, frenzied knot of violence. Corbin's fist connected with the killer's jaw, a sickening crunch that was swallowed by the wind. The killer returned the favor, a wild, flailing blow that caught Corbin on the temple, sending a white-hot spear of pain through his head. They stumbled, inches from a fatal fall, the edge of the roof a dark, yawning abyss below them. In the middle of the frantic struggle, a profound change came over the killer. The manic rage, the wild fury, seemed to drain from his face in an instant, replaced by a chilling calm, a moment of profound, unsettling acceptance. He stopped fighting, his body going limp in Corbin's hold, a strange, eerie stillness at the center of the chaos. He looked at Corbin, his feverish eyes filled with a cold, triumphant glint. He smiled, a slow, cold, empty gesture. "I won, detective," he said, his voice a quiet whisper that cut through the sound of the wind. "You're here, aren't you? You're playing my game. You're part of the system." The smile on his lips widened, not with malice, but with a chilling satisfaction. It was a victory not of strength, but of philosophy. He had not just brought Corbin to his level, he had made him an officer of the law, a hunter, a predator. He had made him a part of the city's corrupt, savage ecosystem. The killer made his last-ditch effort. With a sudden, surprising burst of strength, he tore free from Corbin's grasp, his eyes burning with a feverish triumph. He stumbled back to the control panel, his hands moving with the quick, precise motions of a man who had long rehearsed this final, catastrophic act. His gaunt face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated victory as he threw a single, ominous switch. In that instant, the city below erupted in a symphony of chaos. A series of explosions, not the deafening roars of bombs, but the sharp, percussive crackle of overloaded electrical substations, erupted across the city far below them. The brilliant blanket of light that was the city's grid began to flicker, a dying heart pulsing its last. The explosions, small and distant, looked like a child's fireworks show, a morbidly beautiful display of the killer's genius. He turned, his arms spread wide, a messianic figure against the backdrop of the collapsing city. The wind howled around him, and he laughed, a triumphant, rattling sound that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. His voice, raw and unfiltered, boomed across the rooftops. "The grid is down! The message is received! The city is mine!" Corbin, battered and bruised, his body screaming in protest, didn't hesitate. The killer's victory was a delusion, a philosophical win he refused to grant him. The sight of the city's lights dying, the sound of the faint sirens wailing below, filled him with a cold, focused fury. He ran, ignoring the pain in his ribs, the raw scrapes on his hands. He was a force of nature, a singular point of vengeance. He didn't just tackle the killer, he launched himself at him, a desperate final act. Their bodies, a frenzied knot of rage and despair, went over the edge of the building, a final horrifying embrace. They plummeted, a silent, locked form against the chaos, falling into the darkness they had just created. The screen went black, a pregnant, terrifying silence. Then, a single pulsing red light appeared, a lonely, defiant heart in the darkness. A low hum followed, the sound of a city, like a great, wounded beast, slowly coming back to life. Sirens, a thin, wailing cry, pierced the distance, growing louder, more resolute. The final scene shows Corbin, bruised but alive, lying on a lower ledge, a narrow, forgotten maintenance walkway that had caught them on the way down. He was a broken man, his clothes torn, his body a map of pain. He pulled himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. He looked at the gaping hole in the railing above, then looked down. The killer was gone, a ghost in the darkness. He had won the battle, but not the war. He had left a mark, a scar that the city would forever carry. Back in the office, the early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long, sharp shadows on the floor. Corbin's face was no longer hard, no longer a mask of grim determination. It was tired, but there was a new depth in his eyes, a profound understanding of a truth he had just discovered. Captain Sharma looked at him, her face a mixture of relief and concern. She reached out, her hand gently touching his bruised knuckles. "He's gone, Miles. You did it." Corbin shook his head slowly, his gaze fixed on a distant, smoking plume on the horizon. He didn't look at her, but his voice was a low, steady whisper. "No, he proved his point. We may have won the battle, but the war is never over. The city, it's still alive, but it's fragile. We can't forget that." The episode ends with a final shot of the city, now bathed in the orange glow of a new dawn. The faint scars of the previous night's chaos were visible in the smoke rising from the horizon, a silent, smoldering monument to the fragility of their world. The story of the urban predator was over, but the memory and the hunt had just begun.